Good evening, friends. Tonight we continue our discussion of fascism. The most recurrent criticism of our campaign is that we promote a fascistic agenda, and these criticisms have caused us to be blacklisted from countless organizations and venues in the United States and Canada. Numerous speaking engagements previously scheduled have been cancelled, from Florida to British Columbia, and all on account of our alleged fascism. And yet, no one who uses this label when criticizing our campaign has any idea what they actually mean by it. Last week we discussed this strange phenomenon. This week we will venture into new territory, the hypocrisy of democratic liberals and leftists of all stripes when they decry the violence of the fascists. For this is the most recurring criticism of fascism, is it not? Fascists use violence to promote their political ends, and this is an intolerable evil. The fascists see an offensive war as a legitimate political tool, and we know that war should only be a last resort and only ever in self-defense. The fascists physically beat their political opponents in the streets when rising to power, and then, once they came to power, used the state to silence and murder their enemies. Now, we all know that democratic liberals and communists do the same things and always have. The difference, in our minds, is that violence from these groups is undertaken in the name of a just cause. That cause, in a word, is humanity. When the communists attacked the members of the fledgling National Socialist German Workers' Party, they were doing God's work. The communists were justified in mobbing Hitler and his audience when he spoke in Munich's beer halls because he was preaching hate. When the Allied powers firebombed the town of Dresden, deliberately targeting civilians in order to break the morale of the German people, they were doing God's work. After all, it was the German people who were responsible for Hitler coming to power, so the women and children burned to ashes could not be considered innocent. When the United States and the Soviet Union ravaged Berlin, and the soldiers of the Red Army raped every woman in sight, they were doing God's work. Hitler was a monster who had to be stopped by any means necessary, and the evil German people who supported him deserved the same wrath as he. When the victors of the Second World War set up a kangaroo court and hanged the leaders of defeated Germany for crimes that were not even part of international law at that time, they were doing God's work. The German leaders committed crimes against humanity, and the Allied powers were waging war against them in the name of humanity. This is the crux of the matter. The fascists fought for their respective countries. The democratic liberals and the communists fought for all of humanity. This is why we justify their violence, no matter how horrific. Ultimately, violence against those who do not share the same faith in a universalist humanitarianism is not only necessary, but holy. I said in our last Fireside chat that we would discuss the work of Carl Schmitt. In a book called The Concept of the Political, Schmitt argued that the liberal drive to outlaw war as part of a broader humanitarian agenda accomplished in practice the exact opposite of what was intended. In plain language, trying to eradicate war from human affairs actually intensifies war and makes it infinitely more destructive. For when we believe that those conducting war in the interest of their own people are barbaric, we no longer feel that they are even human, much less are they entitled to humane treatment. And so, whereas warfare was historically a tool to be used in limited situations by self-interested states, the drive to banish war from the human experience led us to wars of annihilation. Schmitt's book was written after the Great War, but it predicted with agonizing prescience the conduct, conclusion, and aftermath of the Second World War and all wars following. Weapons of mass destruction, the deliberate targeting of civilians, insistence on unconditional surrender at all costs, these aberrations from the laws of war we can attribute to the Allied powers. But it is commonly believed that every atrocity committed by the Allies is justified, because they were destroying evil incarnate. They were fighting on the side of good, and the ends justified the means. This perspective is carried through the past several decades and into the present day. Look to the U.S. destruction of Serbia and Iraq, the violent attacks by the anti-fascists in Europe, North America, and Australia, the recurrent threats of assassination of right-wing politicians that are brushed off by the liberal media. These are all justified, sanctified, by being executed in the name of humanity. Exempli gratia. A neo-Nazi throws a rock through the window of an empty synagogue. He is given prison time for a hate crime. An anti-fascist throws a brick at a skinhead. He is not even arrested. Liberals, communists, anti-fascists, Republicans, Democrats, and all others will readily admit that a double standard exists in the law in this regard. But that double standard is warranted because the ideology of the neo-Nazi is undesirable, and the ideology of the anti-fascist is the law of the land. It is not that our lawmakers and our courts and our professors and other authority figures actually deplore violence, for they applaud the most ghastly slaughter when it is in the name of humanity. It is not gentleness or kindness or nobility or greatness of heart that causes our leaders to decry the use of violence by the fascists. It is hypocrisy and nothing besides. This boogeyman of fascism that our critics are all crying about is born of their own ignorance. Politics is the continuation of warfare by other means. Clausewitz had it exactly backward, for both politics and warfare are expressions of the everlasting struggle of humankind. We fight, we resist, we overcome. We seek to defend our families, to gather resources for our own tribes, to protect our own way of life. Everything else is hypocritical moralizing. Tonight, I hope that I have made the point that the drive to eradicate violence from political affairs is unrealistic, and that attempting to do so while defending the use of violence in the name of humanity is outrageously hypocritical, if not insane. Next week, we will discuss the symbolism of the Fasces and why it is critical to the libertarian movement. Until then.